Back now with America the Addicted. Smoking, obesity, drug use, not just crippling individuals in our communities, they're attacking our medical system as well. According to the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse, 30% of sick care costs are due to smoking, excessive drinking, and illegal or prescription drug abuse. Well, today's specialist says it is time to start not only taxing these types of behaviors that are personally and societally expensive, but it's time to start forcing businesses that profit from selling these poisons to Americans to pay up as well. The New York City smoking tax, perhaps the most instructive, but I suspect the tip of the iceberg when you look at the various toxins we all consume. Those costs, just one of the catastrophes that today's specialist Peter Kiernan tackles in his book, Becoming China's Bitch. It makes my greedy bastards look benign, and 9 more catastrophes we must avoid right now. The sin tax always gets lost, Peter, in this moralistic argument, and who are you, who is the big government to tell me whether I can smoke or whether I should eat cheeseburgers or whether I should, whatever this is. On the other hand, people say, well, taxes were designed to do this. Taxes were designed to discourage things that are expensive and bad, and they were designed to encourage things that we want. And I'm interested in how you reconcile the sin tax argument through those two competing lenses.
Yeah, this is literally a circumstance where there's a ditch on both sides of the road. If you go too far in either direction, you've basically run off. On the other hand, if you look at the size of the problem, just take smoking. You know, when the Mustang was introduced in 1965, there were 50 million smokers in the United States. Today, after all these years, 48, 49 years later, there are 46 million. We're down about 5 or 6 million smokers in 48 years.
But as a percentage of the U.S. population, that's a pretty good thing, a statistician would say.
It depends what gets you moving in the morning. If you think going from that percent to that percent works, yeah. I'm much more focused on the fact that we've still got 1,300 people dying every day from smoking-related illnesses. And what's worse, about 3,000 kids pick up the habit every day. And so, you know, this is one of those Malthusian, you know, I think we've got to face the problem.
Imogen?
I come from Europe, I come from Britain, where you can make people do stuff. Okay, our governments, we take government interference. Here, obviously, less so. 1 in 3 Americans are obese. Having a fat tax, say, is hardly going to be a vote winner. It's not politically viable. So
what about corn syrup?
Well,
you could go to the root. Why not tax corn syrup?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that's
how do you deal with these debates?
How does that work? I mean, how do you make politicians do that? How are politicians going to bring that to the table?
Well, I think the first place to start is if you look at obesity, which is a major epidemic. And again, when I was a teenager, which wasn't all that long ago, 4% of the United States kids were obese, and now it's about 18%. You know, we have a runaway freight train. And the only way to do that is to look at the problem, and by almost any yardstick, it's $150 billion of medical care costs per annum. Most people consider that, you know, a worthy target. And what we have to do is go after the people who profit unfairly, because in fact, it was introduced by an English economist, and they came up with this tax. It's called the pig-out tax, and that tax is to, if something costs society more than the people who are paying for it pay, that deficit has to be made up. And he actually introduced it for alcohol, because alcohol created a bigger hole in the economy than the revenues for alcohol and alcohol. And so he recommended an alcohol tax on the alcohol producers. You know, what you have is shareholders are getting away with this, companies are getting away with this, and the simple fact is, to put in a sin tax feels good. You go after, you know, let's go after the cola companies,
right, the poison producers, and of varying degrees.
And well, some people like to go after the people who are buying the cola. But the trouble is, the people who are most disproportionately affected are the poor. Yeah. And so they're the ones who are least able to afford it, and it becomes a regressive tax. So on its own, to the point you're raising, it doesn't work. Yeah. It's a single silver bullet, and what we need is a full magazine.
And what you're saying is the full magazine is a hit to the producers, not just the consumers.
And we're comfortable doing that with pollution. If you pollute, you pay. If you have some sort of denigration to society, you pay. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with food and tobacco? The Tobacco Master Settlement of 1998 was $206 billion. Sounds like a big number. Over 25 years, it's $8 billion a year. It's a pittance. If you take the present value of that, it's about $100 billion. That's less than the cost, medical costs of smoking for 1 year. And the worst part of all is these states.
Government must have done that deal.
There's no doubt about it. And the states made it even better, Dylan, because they said, we'll discount it to a present value and we'll spend it all at once like we won the lottery.
Exactly. Yes. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, Peter, I'm trying to reconcile the idea that you want to curb these behaviors, whether it's smoking, drinking, eating Twinkies, drinking Coke, all those things at the same time that you don't actually want to make this a consumption tax. It sounds like you want to make it a tax on the producers, the poison producers, as Dylan calls it. But I'm not sure how that works, because if you're basically having the company subsidize these bad behaviors, you don't actually go from those 46 million smokers to 20 million. Try to explain that.
Sure, there are two pieces to the equation. One is, I don't think you can avoid some sort of sin tax, and in fact, we're addicted to those two. We'll have 20 billion each state. The combined will get 20 billion of cigarette tax. So I think you have to tax the individual users. What I am concerned about is doing that in isolation. That seems to be necessary, perhaps, but nowhere near sufficient. Now, the second part of your question is the most vexing, and I'm not sure I got the magic answer. What does it take to get people to stop doing something? I define customer loyalty as ingesting a product that you know is going to kill you. That seems to me to define customer loyalty.
I'm a smoker. I've quit smoking. I will give you a personal anecdote, which is I quit smoking when I decide that I want to not smoke anymore, not when anybody tells me. I think that is universally true.
I think it goes directly to the wisdom of the question that I was asked, that raising money to help combat the health costs, I think, is a place where taxation works. It does not get somebody who is on his 35th cigarette of the day to stop from having the 36th.
Unless they want to stop.
It's the only way. And so what I think what we should do is turn this into an argument of incentivizing health. Mm-hmm. And if you had, for example, a broad gauge, I mean, if you look at the CASA report, it said $730 billion per annum. That feels like a target-rich environment. Let's do something to incentivize health, to create a health dividend, to encourage the FDA to go after cigarette companies as if it's an addictive drug.
You incentivize health, and you'll torpedo the AMA, the health insurance monopolies, the drug companies. And I mean, you sound like me now, Peter.
Well, I'm
giving you the answers that I get.
I guess it's a contagion. I'm catching it.
So, be careful. Jonathan, it's great to see you. I'm sorry I didn't get you with Peter. Rob, it's always a pleasure. Imogen, thank you so much. Peter, yes, across the board, thank you for spearheading one of the fronts on this fight.
I love coming here because we're fighting good fights.
Becoming China's Bitch. Check it out. And when you're done, read some Greedy Bastards.